A few years ago, I had a phone call from a woman on a church committee, and she posed a very interesting question. She said, "We would like some help in developing an evaluation system by which we can assess the progress of our congregation towards church objectives. Can you help us?" And I thought that was very enlightened, and I told her so. And then I said, "Have you got any of these objectives written down?" And she says, "Yes, we do." And I said, "Would you mind reading one of them to me?" And she read, "Loving service." And so I said, "That's nice. Have you any more of these written down?" And then she read to me this list: unselfish devotion, sincere fairness, and so on. Now, there isn't anything wrong with these items, except that they're not much use to anybody in the form that they're in. It isn't possible to say what actions to take to develop this evaluation system. It isn't possible to say what to do in order to find out whether you're actually done, whether you've accomplished what it was that you hoped to accomplish. But people are always talking in abstractions, aren't they? They say, make my people better self-starters, or make them more conscientious, or turn them into good managers, make them customer-oriented. But until you know what these words mean, you don't know what to do. There's no way of selecting relevant activities. As long as you go to your doctor and simply say, "It hurts," the doctor doesn't know what to do, what actions to take in order to make it unhurt. So, like the performance analysis, the goal analysis is a procedure that we use all the time simply because we have to. When do we use a goal analysis? When two conditions exist. We do it whenever you are expected to accomplish something, and that something isn't yet clearly defined. That's when you do it. In our world, then, we use a goal analysis whenever somebody wants us to help achieve some state or condition that they can't yet describe except in vague terms, or positive self-concept, make them interact tactfully. We want user-friendliness, and so on. Whenever you run into that situation, reach for the goal analysis. When would you not reach for the goal analysis? When people can already tell you the specific performances that they want to see demonstrated. If they can tell you right off what they want to see, what success would look like for them, then you don't need a goal analysis. Now, the goal analysis is a 5-step procedure, and let me briefly review them with you, and then I'll show you one example. There are others in the goal analysis book. First thing to do is to state the goal, but be sure to state the goal in terms of an outcome rather than in terms of a process. For instance, make it say, has a positive self-concept, rather than to say, develop a positive self-concept. You see, the word develop implies process, and you might find yourself talking about how to get it before you know what the it looks like. And the object of the goal analysis is to describe the end result, not the process for getting it. So write down the goal in any words that come to mind, but make it state an outcome. Then the next step is to list the performances. In other words, answer the question, what would I have to see somebody say, or hear them say, or see them do before I would be willing to point my finger in their direction and say, aha, that person has a positive self-concept, or that person interacts tactfully. What would it take to cause you to be willing to put that goal label on that individual? And just list those performances in words and phrases. Thirdly, then, you go back and sort the list. And we have to do this because frequently in thinking through this process, some of the items we put on our list are just about as fuzzy or vague as the one we started with. In which case, we take each of those fuzzy items and put it on a separate piece of paper and do the same thing with it that we did with the one we started with. In other words, if we say, well, how do we know whether somebody has good selling skills, and then write down, well, they're conscientious or they're customer-oriented, when we go back to sort the list, we couldn't check that item as being a performance because you can't tell whether somebody's doing that or not. And so you would take each of those items and do another little goal analysis on those until your list consists of nothing but performances. Then the next step is to take each of those performances that are left and write them out into a complete sentence. You're not writing objectives here, you're just turning them into a complete sentence so that you can test whether you're finished. And the way you do that, the way you test whether you're finished, is to look at all the performances on your list and ask yourself, if somebody said or did these things, would I be willing to say that that person represents the goal? In other words, if somebody did all of these things, or said these things, or avoided doing the things that I've listed, would I be willing to say that they were user-friendly? Would I be willing to say that they had a positive self-concept, or whatever the goal statement might be? If your answer is yes, then you're finished. If you're hesitant to say yes, then ask yourself, what else would they have to say or do before you'd be willing to say that they represent the goal? And that's it. Now, when all of the items are on your list are performances, you're ready to draft objectives, but only for those items that your target pop cannot now perform. That's why we don't turn these into objectives immediately. That's why we just write them out into complete sentences. Now, here's a fast example. Suppose you want somebody to be security conscious. We worked through this example in a manufacturing plant with a number of managers. And when they were done with their list, this is what they had. People lock up their documents, they don't reveal secrets, and so on. Now look down the list and ask yourself whether each one is a performance. Can you tell whether somebody locks up their documents? Well, sure you can. Can you tell if they don't reveal secrets? Well, maybe you can't get at them to find that out, but at least it's possible to recognize when people are telling secrets. You can tell whether somebody locks and checks their safe. You can tell whether they wear their badge. You can tell whether they sign in or sign out. But then the managers said, wait a minute, we put thinks security on this list, and that's about as fuzzy as be security conscious. So what they did was they thought about that, and they did another list of performances, and it turned out to be the same list that they started with. Somebody who thinks security is somebody who locks up their documents, and so on. So they just wiped it out and had then a final list of those 5 performances. Now, be sure to practice the goal analysis with someone else. It will be a useful thing to do. And be sure to look at the goal analysis of at least 1 or 2 other people before you move ahead to another module. This is a skill that we use all the time, and it will give you a form of X-ray vision.